Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Scarlett Lewis, and I'm the founder of the Jessie Lewis Choose Love movement. I am joined by Carolyn Maguire. She is the author of Why Will No One Play With Me? And also the author of many incredible articles. And she's going to talk a little bit more about herself in a moment. So happy that you could all join us. We are recording this, so you will get a copy of this if you'd like to share it afterwards. Thank you. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end for questions. If you have questions, if you want to share something in the chat, I will be monitoring the chat. And I appreciate you all very much. I know it's late, but we're gonna have an incredible evening. When Carolyn sent me this book, I just want you to look at it. And this is only a portion of what I did to the book because this is amazing. It's a must read. I wish that I had this book when I was raising my two boys as a single parent. But Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I am honored to be co-hosting this webinar tonight with you.
Well, right back at you. I am so happy about what you're doing. Can
We
you hear
can't
me?
hear you.
Oh, no.
We can't hear you.
Okay, hold on.
I think you're muted, Carolyn, which is what I did
Okay.
when I started. Let's see. You're muted.
I
Okay.
can hear her. I can hear her fine.
You're muted.
I can hear her.
You can hear her?
I can hear her. I can hear her.
Okay. Wow. I'm sorry. I can't hear you for some reason.
Oh,
ahead.
no. Okay. So I'm thrilled to be here. I think this is so important. To me, there's nothing more important. And for years, I've been trying to get people to pay attention to social emotional learning, how our children feel, and it's the most important thing. And I'm thrilled, and I do, as you know, a ton of stuff. But Scarlett and I have a lot in common. We have kindred spirits, and I'm honored to be here. I've been excited all day. I'm wearing pink to show love. Like I'm all in.
That's so amazing, Caroline. Well, here's the thing. If I said survival of the, you guys would all probably respond fittest, right? Because that's what we've grown up learning and knowing. And that is attributed to Charles Darwin. But in fact, Charles Darwin, the famous evolutionist, never said survival of the fittest. He said survival of the most compassionate. Most sympathetic is what he said. And by sympathetic, we know he meant altruistic, generous, and compassionate. And that just makes sense, doesn't it? We need each other. We're actually wired to connect with one another. We need one another, but we need to know how to get along with others, to manage our emotions. We need to know how to play with one another. Even us big kids, it's really important. And here's the amazing thing that I learned 8 years ago when I got into this, following the murder of my 6-year-old son, looking for a solution. I realized, oh my gosh, we have to learn this stuff. These are essential life skills, but we're not born with them. And this book and what you teach, Carolyn, is really vitally important. So do you want to start taking us through it?
I definitely want to take you through it, and I'm definitely in agreement. And it's just a great segue because we don't all learn these things naturally. There's this misnomer that everybody picks it up except for a few people. And actually, that's not what research shows. Research shows that most people do not have self-awareness. Most people can't identify their emotions. Most people need direct instruction. And if we go back to our grandmas, right, I think our grandparents didn't have some of these tools, and yet I think in many ways they did, because they would talk about the golden rule and they would talk about treating others. And so I think there's so much to be gained from just starting by saying, we all need to learn this and work on it every day. And it is shown to be more important than any academic skill in terms of success. So you mentioned Darwin's survival of the fittest. It really is going to impact children if they do not have these skills in the workplace, in life, in relationships, and, what causes depression? Being trapped, feeling like there's no way to handle yourself and your situation. This gives children that toolkit. So that's just my segue, since it's a perfect thing. Scarlett, is it okay if I share some slides and go through the points of the book and everything?
Please do. While you're saying that, we have to model these things for our kids as well. So this is just as much for us as it is for our kids. Definitely share. Let's get into it. Let's dive right in. We don't have that much time.
All right, let's get into it. So I will share my screen. So welcome everyone. I'm Caroline Maguire. I'm thrilled to be here. And we do have to model this. Scarlett gave me a ringing introduction, but I'll just say I have a master's in education. I like to mention that so people don't just think, oh, I invented this and I have no background. Nope, I have a master's in education and early childhood development. And I went to Lesley. And any of you who are teachers who went to Lesley, you can definitely write in the chat. We are taught very much about social emotional learning. It is really a huge piece. And I also went through social thinking level 1A training. I want to just mention briefly what this book and this concept is about. When I was first working with children who have executive function challenges like ADHD, formerly known as Asperger's syndrome, I found that there was nothing to teach parents how to coach their child, and nothing that put a resource that put things in non-academic terms. If you look out there at social skills curriculums, if you look at books, if you look at the materials, it is very dense. I once turned to my husband, and I have a bunch of social skills curriculums on the shelves behind me. I have a book buying problem maybe. I said to my husband, that our son definitely needs this, and our daughter, and that if I passed away, because he said, well, maybe this book, like, it's a lot of work. Do we really need this book in the world? And I said, well, take one of these curriculums. He is a Dartmouth MBA, right? He is a smart guy. He took it and he said, this is unintelligible. And I said, right. So if I passed away, your job would be to take these books and teach our kids. And he said, oh, I'd never do it. I'd give up. Like, this is too hard. I can't understand what they're saying. And that's what I found. What I found was, as I was working with kids, all kinds of kids, some kids where they just needed a little help, some kids where they needed a lot of help. Parents had all these questions and no one was really helping them to understand, which meant they can't model, they can't reinforce, they can't do all the things we need them to do. And then educators who aren't social skills specialists are in the classroom, in the high school, wherever it may be, and they're desperately searching for answers. So that's what this has been about for me. This Why Will No One Play With Me is all in layman's terms. It is easy to follow. And it was all inspired by one little boy who, when I asked him some silly question like what would he change if he could change anything, he said he wanted to know why no one would play with him. And I just couldn't get past it. It was in my ears. And many of you have probably had this question asked of you. And so I continually kept thinking about this need. And I educated myself and I got the master's degree and I kept pursuing it. And the other piece I'm going to mention that fits right into COVID is that the kids I work with don't have friends and they don't have play dates. And we know kids need to practice. And so a lot of what I'm going to share with you tonight is because pre-COVID, I've had to get really creative. The kids I work with didn't have anyone to practice with. We get people eventually, we get creative, we find kids for them to practice with, but we're trying to learn these skills and then they don't have built-in playmates because they've alienated kids or because they're too shy. And so what I want to share with you tonight is that even though we are in this very difficult time, I believe not only should social emotional learning go on, and it is the most important thing we can do, but I also want to tell you it's totally possible. And some of the stuff I've invented since COVID started, and some of it I've been doing forever because I had parents calling me from Colombia and saying, and me saying, oh, we've got to just find you a social skills group. We've got to find you someone there. And then when there wasn't someone, me saying, all right, I'm going to try to do this via Zoom. So I want to tell you that I'm going to share with you tonight stuff, and it's not airy-fairy. I've been doing it for years because I just did not accept when people said to me, if a child won't go to a social skills group or doesn't qualify for one, that it can't be done. I was like, it can be done. And so I just want to start by saying, I'm going to share with you how we can do some things to really help kids right now. So I'll just mention the social emotional competencies, right? Self-management, social awareness, self-awareness, relationship building, decision-making, right? Social emotional learning is so much more than play, right? It's the ability to communicate with each other, the ability to manage ourselves. And most people can't identify their own emotions. So who is this for? Anyone. If you look at my background, the majority of the kids that I work with have ADHD, but I now work with people who are so shy that they can't talk to the kid next to them. I work with teenagers. There are lots of pictures here, but the pictures are so that you remember and because people are visual. But you can, if you're working with a teenager, just don't show them the picture if they think they're too cool for the picture. It's also to relieve the strain on the practitioners in our schools, right? So I know a lot of you are teachers, a lot of you are in schools and you're doing so much. But the more we train parents and the more we share information with them, the more parents can help reinforce, the more parents can do that teaching at home. And maybe you're totally remote and you're relying on parents to be those teachers. And it is totally possible for us to continue learning right now. And this is for ages 5 to 25. The biggest thing that I find is the child's ability to use language, right? Their access to language. So this isn't for kids who are on the autism spectrum who have very limited language. But here's what I would say. There's great materials for them out there. What there isn't materials out there for is a kid who's introverted or a kid who's, not necessarily able to reach out. So that's who it's for. So here's the thing. Taking my master's in early childhood education, one of the things I truly believe in that we're doing is that we can simulate play experiences and social experiences at home. If you think about us as humans, we are social animals. And part of that can be play and interaction with grandparents, siblings, a pod that you're in, small group learning, coaching from the sidelines, being at the kitchen counter and saying, hey, I'm hearing that tone. I'm wondering if we want to rephrase that, right? Modeling it between parents. Today, my son, who's only 6 and has some language challenges, told me that he was falling in love with people. And I tried to explain to him that really he was saying he loves people, right? And he said, no, I'm falling in love with them because when you give people flowers, you love them. Now, that's a teachable moment, right? We're showing our kid what is love, what is compassion, why do we give flowers? Is love just about flowers? No, people might never get flowers and they're loved by you, right? So we have this opportunity, and I always think of Sesame Street like the word of the day. We can at home say, like, today we're all going to work on being better listeners. Today we're going to look at each other in the eye. And I have teenagers doing this too, by the way. This isn't just little ones. So we can be a little out of the box right now and try things. I'm a big believer in experimentation. A lot of my greatest stuff came from me saying, I wonder if this could be done. So I'm a big believer, as I said, in parent coaching so that we show parents how to do this and they can. So one of the things I'd say to teachers, because I've had a lot of teachers that I've been training and a lot of teachers who are just desperately trying to do this in this current environment, is the more we strengthen the home parent connection and the teacher connection, the more we can teach social emotional across these, strange times in the virtual world. So the parent is reinforcer. So we want to educate parents, right? We can make little quick educational videos with our phone. We can give them material. We can share information. We can help parents reinforce and understand. We can show them how to facilitate. We can teach them the language we use, right? So different schools use different language. What language you're using is something you can share with parents so that they can do it. And by the way, if you're a parent listening, this is the stuff you can ask for. So if you're feeling like your school is saying to you, hey, I dropped a bunch of social skills lessons for your kid in a Dropbox, you can go back and say, you can use my name, Caroline Maguire said that you can teach me some things. And what I'm finding is schools will do this. We just have to sort of think out of the box and do it. So learning in the COVID world, right? So think about social skills at their core, right? At their core, it's about learning how to shift our communication and our perspective and to think about other human beings, right? To step into their shoes and think about what it is that is going on for the person opposite you, right? Most people believe part of how that happens is through simulation. So I don't know everything about you, but I can imagine based on my own experience how you might be feeling in that moment. But the problem in the world is we don't pause, right? We rush through life, we grab the last bagel, and we don't think about the other people in our house. So in this COVID times, one of the things I am really encouraging families to do is eat dinner together. Eat dinner, make eye contact, put away all the electronic devices, and actually have conversations. If one of the people in your family struggles with making conversation, you can use the build on that lessons in Why Will No One Play With Me to literally learn how to build a conversation. One of the things that I find with all kids is that they can't tell a tight story, right? They tell a story and it meanders all over creation. So one of the other things we can do is tell a tight story. Have everybody in the family, that way no one feels picked on, no one feels singled out, right? Because everyone can learn from this. Tell a story and think about who are you talking to, why are you telling it, and how much detail do you need? And you can compassionately talk to your family ahead and say, hey, we're going to do this. So I may ask you, what detail you're giving and why do you need to? And I'm not picking on you. I just want to help and coach you. Now, again, I have teenagers doing this and they may roll their eyes, but they do it. Listening, right? How many of us forget to listen, forget to think about the person opposite us? So a lot of families, we can pause and we can say, today we're all going to try to listen. And I'm going to share some lessons in a minute. Reading cues, right? I can read the cues of the people on this Zoom call, especially because the sound is off. So your child has trouble reading social cues. Teachers can put a Zoom together and put off the noise and have kids read the social cues of people's facial expressions. And if they can't, we can show them videos, we can show them pictures, and we can teach them and then do those kind of role plays. If your school is not doing it, you can do this with your family. And by the way, one of the reasons I discovered this was that some grandparents said to me, what can we do? We're trying to help our daughter. And I was like, we're going to invent it. You can literally look at people on Zoom. In the real times, I would have you go to a mall or go to a box store and observe people and watch their facial expressions and learn from that and report back. But you can still do it because over Zoom, we have gesticulation, we have agreement, we have nodding of heads, we have people who have frowns on their face. The other thing is that I think COVID is the biggest self-regulation and emotional regulation challenge that we've faced thus far. And so one of the things we can do is work on those emotional coping skills and take people's emotional temperature and check in with them and create systems for our kids like a Zen corner, right? A Zen box if you live in an apartment, something for them to go and decompress, ways to find joy in daily life, allowing them space to do something that brings their mood back up, right? And I'm going to teach you a communication technique in a minute that's going to make it easier to talk about these things. Don't worry, I'm not delusional. I know if you point at a teenager and say, your mood is terrible and it's affecting the whole family, you won't get far. But my biggest thing is we can do these things in COVID and then practice in the real world. So I want to just go over really briefly the steps for a child to learn social skills, just so that if you're not aware and you're not a professional, you know. And all this is laid out really, really well in Why Will No One Play With Me? So this is just a snippet. But one of the things we need to do is identify our children's story or mindset. Right? So many of you are probably thinking that if you said, let's do the listening day or let's have a conversation, your child would say, I don't have a problem. I don't need to do that. I'm a great listener, right? So when we talk about the communication technique, I'm going to say to you that this piece might be something you spend a long time on, where you're trying to help your child think about how the social world functions and to learn to step into people's shoes. I think it's the hardest piece, right? We all have these stories we tell ourselves. And what happens is we get entrenched in those stories. And so one of the things we have to do is help kids shift, but not through a direct attack, right? We're going to use techniques to help them become more reflective, more introspective, more self-aware, to take a bird's eye view and think about things and come to their own conclusions. It is painful. It takes a while. It is the best thing you'll ever do for your kid, right? So the second thing is paving the way. And this is very much like that. We're not going to just barge right in to work on social skills. We're not going to just barge right in to work on something a kid needs to work on. We're going to pave the way. Part of paving, and I'm sorry, it always does come back to us as parents, is that we need to model getting help, talking about our feelings, and being open to feedback, right? So that might be part of the paving process, that you and your partner start to get help for things, that instead of being the person who'll never call Apple Care, you take that help because you're modeling it for your child. We're going to have more collaborative conversations, right? And talk about things. And that technique I'm going to teach you is really going to help. We're going to also talk about the social world. If you as a parent are a wallflower or are not being social and reaching out during COVID, we're going to need you to start doing that. And we need to talk about people's feelings, talk about how to take their perspective, right? Everything. So I'll give a silly little example. The other day, I thought the garbage would go out on Friday because of Thanksgiving, but then it turned out that the garbage went out on the regular day, right? So what did I need to do? Instead of complaining in front of my children and family about the fact that we now have 2 weeks of garbage, I needed to model stepping into the garbage person's shoes and saying, okay, it didn't go out. I misunderstood. He misunderstood me. I need to step into his shoes. It's Thanksgiving. He doesn't want to hear about my garbage problems, right? We can do this in every way that we face so that we're stepping into the other person's shoes and we're modeling thinking about it and understanding the way people navigate the social world, talking about play expectations, talking about expectations socially, talking about it in a way so that it's part of your daily life. The next thing is an image to navigate toward, right? A lot of kids don't intuitively get, how do I act? How do I play? How do I share? How am I cooperative? With little ones, it's actually so much easier because you can say things like, I'm being really cooperative right now, or I love it when you're flexible. But with older kids, a lot of it is really about how we act toward each other and really having them become better observers, which I'm going to talk about. And then we have to practice and learn. So one of the things I want to say for anyone who's getting anxious about, oh, if we do all this, how are we going to translate it back into the real world post-COVID? I actually have found as certain states open up that we are able to practice these things in the virtual world and then translate them back into the in-person world. And one reason is that we talk about it. But if you think about it, even in the online world, there are social norms, there are social cues, there are rules within a group, there are expectations. And so what we're going to try to do is be more reflective about it, right? We're going to try to ask our kid at dinner, so you really love that video game, you really love playing with those kids, like, what are the rules? How does it work? What do people feel? Has anyone broken the rules? They love to tell you about that. And then we're going to be able to translate this back into the real world. I will tell you, I spent most of my career trying to get kids away from gaming, away from virtual, right? But this is where we are right now, right? And if we think about it, there are dynamics and there are messages within even an online community, and even within these Google Hangouts and different things, there are people breaking social norms. And we need them for our teenagers, especially to nurture relationships right now. So I'm going to sort of say that a lot of this is going to be done in the virtual world, and then it's going to be translated back, especially in communities where we're not going to in-person school. So telling a tighter story, I just want to show you, it's in Why Will No One Play With Me, but it is who, what, why, right? What story are you telling and why are you telling that story? And a lot of times people who overshare or people who undershare have, too much detail or too little detail. And so what we're going to try to do is ask questions. Who are you telling that story for? What's your level of intimacy with them? And you're going to practice. So when I prep kids for college interviews, whatever I do, I use telling a tight story, because most people can't tell a tight story if you think about it. And it's a really easy thing to work on right now that will have huge dividends. If you think about times in your life where you have 3 or 4 minutes to make an impression, right? It's great to be able to sort of organize your thoughts and come out with something. So here's the coaching technique. In coaching, we learn a communication technique that works really well with teenagers, with reluctant spouses. I always say this technique works with mother-in-laws. If you're trying to organize the holidays and you need somebody to be able to communicate with you better, it creates a much more collaborative flow. And so this is a huge piece of what we need to do to get people to open up and be willing to be coached. And part of it is using open questions. So the idea is that instead of telling someone, we ask, right? So we say, what did you do today? What was it like to play? You say that you couldn't join in. How come? How come is the single greatest question on earth, because it's simple. So if you can't remember questions, people write me all the time and they say, well, you're really good at these questions. I couldn't think of a question. Just ask, how come? What's it like for you? Right? Kids say to me all the time, I'll see you when there's a vaccine. I'm not doing this, right? So I don't go into, you can't not go to school for the next year. You can't learn anything. I just say, what do you mean by that? Like, what do you envision? What's going to happen then, right? And I get from them more information. So the idea here is that instead of getting one-word answers, or instead of imposing your views, you're getting information, right? So even with little kids, you can ask these questions, right? You can ask them, what did it feel like? How was it? Right? Oh, you're not sure how to mix in on the playground? What does mixing in look like? And what happens is a beautiful thing. What happens is as you say these things, it's like you float above your body and you hear yourself saying them. And you start to really understand your position, right? And you start to reflect on things, right? So many of my I'll see you when the vaccine come kids, when we've talked about it over time, they start to realize like, that's not actually a realistic statement, right? Or what I mean is, I just can't do this. It's too hard. But if we just launch into tell, we don't get anywhere. The next technique is part of this, and it is the easiest one and the most effective. And it is called reflective listening. Now, they use this technique in prisons, right? If you are working with teenagers, if you have a teenager, it is priceless. All you do is you repeat back your child's statement or the statement of the child you're working with without you can use their words, or you can just do the gist, right? I can't always remember what people say, so I do the gist. And what happens is you're confirming that you've kind of captured their feelings accurately. You're clarifying their thoughts, right? Let me understand you is the underlying feeling. And what happens is people feel very validated and accepted. People start to feel like you're listening to them. And instead of jumping into your tell or getting angry, which is so easy as a parent, right? We all do it. You're really hearing from them. So I have a little story. I had a boy who felt that if he felt hungry, tired, cranky, whatever, and he was a teenager, he was like 17 years old, that it was okay for him to be rude. And he also had this thing that he would do where if someone was talking and they weren't using what he called economy of words, he would just make a motion with his hands and go like this, like move it along. And he was really bright. I mean, really bright. And if his teachers were not teaching something interesting, and this is going to send some of you educators over the edge, he would pull out his notebooks and start doing his homework. And his mothers were justifiably worried, right? Here's this really bright kid. What's going to happen to him? He alienates people. They were worried, he might not have satisfying relationships, that bosses wouldn't put up with this. And so what ended up happening was I just asked him about it. And he told me his position. And he told me, like, this is what I believe, and you're not going to change me. So what did I do? I didn't launch into, that's preposterous, that's rude. I simply said, okay, so let me understand. What you're saying is that if people aren't saying something that you're interested in hearing, that it's okay to rush them along and tell them that you're not interested in speaking. And he got very upset. And he said, well, Caroline, when you say it like that, I was like, say it like that. I'm just literally recapping what you're saying. And he started to think, right? He didn't get mad at me for saying what he had said. He was willing to engage a kid who didn't like to engage, a kid who wouldn't talk to people about stuff. And he started to think about what he was saying, and he became more reflective, and he floated up above his body and he heard what he was saying. And he started to argue with me about why that couldn't be what he meant, because that's rude, right? Now, his mothers had told him he was rude probably 1,000 times, but he didn't hear it then, or he didn't take it in. But when he heard his own words, he didn't like them, because he was at heart a wonderful kid who didn't understand the social world. And so I always joke to people, use this with mother-in-laws, use this with bosses. You have a difficult person at work, recap what they say and be neutral. That's part of it. You have to be neutral because it's a very reflective process. So what you're doing is not expecting the heavens to open up and for them to say, I've had this realization today. What you're doing is planting the seed. You're having them start to think about what they feel. So whatever they say, I don't need to use a planner. I'm good. I write it on my hand, right? Okay, you can talk about it. Or their position on the social world, right? Sometimes kids have beliefs about the social world where they think people will invite them even if they don't talk to anyone at school. And we know that that's not true. But instead of attacking that position, we want to create a more reflective environment so they can build those social emotional competencies of self-awareness, of self-management. So this technique is really going to help because it helps them evaluate, it helps them learn, and it helps them, rather than telling them, we are getting the child's perspective. And that's one of the things, nobody asks children for their perspective. No one asks them what they're thinking. And so they're actually a lot of times misunderstood. We think we know what's going on inside, but we don't necessarily know. And part of also building that self-awareness muscle and that self-management muscle that we want to build is that they have to understand themselves, right? And what they're like in different situations and what they're likely to do, and that this will help build that as well. So what I'm going to say to you is that in this situation, we're kind of coaching from the sidelines as we're coaching kids around social skills, right? So a lot of sibling things are going on nowadays. We've been in the house too much. We're together a little too much, right? So we're going to prompt them to remember their playmates' feelings. So rather than saying to them, you're awful to your brother, we're going to coach them more, right? What do you feel right now? What's the expression on your brother's face? What do you think he's feeling? And we're going to use those open questions, unless obviously there's a safety issue, in which case we have to jump in, right? The other thing I love to do is I love to cue kids, right? If they're with a playmate, maybe we don't tell them they're being rude, we cue them. And we also have to remember that kids have to develop these play skills, right? They're lagging skills often. They're skills that have to be developed. Everyone develops at different rates. But one of the things we want to do is really ask them to think about what's going on, right? One of the best questions you can ask in play situations or even in teenage situations is, what's your social role? Right? What's going on here? What are the expectations? What's your social role? And all that kind of goes back to the open questions technique and the reflective listening technique I just mentioned, because you're really asking them to be more reflective rather than telling. So I mentioned that I really believe we can still develop social skills even in COVID. And one of the ways is simulation, right? So what do we need to develop social skills? We need social models. We need to witness things. We need to reflect on our behavior. We need to take a desired skill and adapt it. We need to really think about the roots in this situation, right? What are the roots? What are we trying to accomplish? And we can find ways for kids to simulate that or mimic it, even in this virtual world. So I'm going to give you an example. If a child is having a hard time, where they get really upset and they rush out of the room, or they don't share, or they're too bossy, right? We can still have them play with siblings at home, and we can talk to them ahead of time, and we can talk about that skill. We can work on that skill, and we can simulate that play experience at home. We can jump on Zoom and we can simulate the experience of reading the room by reading what's going on in the Zoom situation, right? We can, if a kid is struggling with self-regulation in the in-person world, we can take them into the backyard. I have a lesson called Silly Goofy, and you take them to the backyard, have them run around, shoot water guns, bounce on trampolines, get all riled up, and then teach them how to go from up here to a more calm state. So I'm not at school, I'm not in the play yard, I'm not where these things normally occur, but I'm simulating the experience. So we can do this with anything, we just have to be creative and kind of think outside the box. So a few things I mentioned is playing games together, right? How many of us know the person who's a good winner or a good loser, or who can't handle losing, right? Play games, we're gonna bait that skill, right? We're gonna work on being a better at coping with our emotions when we win or when we lose. And we can make something the focus of the day. I keep thinking of Sesame Street, like the letter of the day. One of the things that I think that we forget is that kids don't know what expectations look like, right? So what does it look like to be cooperative? So one of the things that we can do is we can play games or encourage families to play games so that kids know what cooperative looks like, right? Let's talk about it ahead of time. Let's role play it. Let's model what cooperative looks like. And then let's do things that make you be cooperative, right? At business schools now, they have people play games together, and sometimes they don't allow them to talk in order to build cooperative skills, right? So one of the things I love to do is activities like putting a puzzle together, building together, right? You can get Tinker Toys, you can get other things and have people build together and say to them, the goal is to be cooperative. What does that look like? How does that give and take going to happen? We can do cooking, right? You have to read directions, you have to build organizational skills, and then you also have to work cooperatively with each other. And we can prompt those skills, right? And ask them, like, today I'm going to ask you to be flexible about transitions. Today I'm going to ask you to be flexible about what we eat. And we can help kids build the skills even though we're at home. So this is listening looks. And one of the things I would say is that even in the virtual world, even in the world we're in now, we can teach kids to be more present, right? So sitting squarely. We can teach them how to hold their body. We can have conversations with them at the kitchen table even, and have them realize, what does it look like to be a good listener? How do you look when you're listening? How many of us have had that feedback for kids where they're in class and maybe they are listening, but they don't look like they're listening? We can have them show these different elements of, holding back comments, ears are open, paying attention to the speaker, and we can demonstrate and role play those things. You can literally have a lesson where a teacher says, we're going to learn X today, and what we're going to ask is that everyone demonstrate good listening. I have a game in Why Will No One Play With Me where you have to draw different things. So you have to listen to instructions and hear them and then draw based on those instructions. And it builds that listening muscle. The reflective listening also is a great thing where you have someone say something and then you have to parrot it back. And most of us can't do it because most of us don't listen. So it's actually a great way to build that. there's a lot of nonverbal communication in the world, right? And so we can have scavenger hunts even where we have them spy on facial expressions, right? And collect, everybody they see who has making eye contact. When we're in normal times, I have kids do this at malls and box stores, but we can still do it. We can still do it in Zoom. There's videos out there of people doing different things that you can use for body language, but I also would say that even on a Zoom lesson that kids are learning, there's lots of body language going on. And we can also play emotional charades where we show them different emotions and we ask them to identify them. And they're starting then to learn how to read those emotions. One of my favorite things with little ones to do is to talk about emotions and talk about the worries they have. One of my beliefs, and maybe this comes from being an ADHD person myself, is that we talk a lot about how to modify emotions and how to sort of process emotions. But the fact is that for some kids, a worry or emotion feels huge. So it doesn't matter that the size of the problem is not that big, right? It matters that inside of them, it feels enormous. It feels weighty, right? So with little ones who might not have as much language, what I do is I take a bunch of cars and trucks and I ask them, how big does the car need to be or the truck to carry your worry? Right? Because again, if we say, oh, it's nothing, it's just a small worry, it doesn't matter because to them, it's a huge worry. It's filling up all the space in their head, right? I teach little kids, by the way, about rumination because research shows that ruminative thoughts that are negative actually impede people's ability to take positive actions. And they affect all of the way you behave. And they also actually withdraw you from the world enough, right? You're so in your own world that you're not as self-aware. So they've done research studies that show that people who are self-aware, right? They're able to read the room, they're able to read social cues. If they are ruminators and they have negative thoughts constantly drawing them away, they miss social cues because they're thinking what they're thinking in their own head. So with little ones, I do a lot of how worried should I really be? How much horsepower does it take to carry this worry? With older kids, I just use the rating scale and I show them the rating scale and I ask them how big it feels inside. You can just use questions, right? So your kid comes in, they have a worry, you're at the kitchen counter or you're talking to a student. And you can just say to them, how big does this feel on a scale of 1 to 5 to you? So we're again using our questions to sort of help them be more reflective. And a lot of times they'll say, it feels like a 5, but I know it's actually like a very small problem. But the thing is, now we need to help them with the fact that it feels so big and so weighty. And so I wanted to mention this because I think the more reflective we make things, the more we actually help people with emotional coping. The other thing is that one of the things I love to do is I have this mat and I ask kids to stand on it and to step into someone else's shoes. But you can literally just do this with questions because part of perspective taking and thinking about others and the compassion and all of the wonderful things that Scarlett talks about really come from thinking about other people and stepping into their shoes and understanding them better. What are their motivations? What are they about? What are they feeling right now? Based on past history, what do you know about them? Many times I have kids who, have canceled a meeting with professors 9 times or something. And then when they want to go take a test with more time or leave early or something, the professor doesn't even return their email. And they'll say to me, they're so mean, they're so mean. And I'll say, well, wait a minute, let's look at the history, right? Let's step into their shoes. What are they feeling? And that makes things a more reflective process, right? So many of us struggle with kids blaming or kids not taking responsibility or not seeing their role. to help them see their role, I love to ask them these questions and help them think about it and take that bird's eye view, because that really builds that social emotional muscle, right? We need them to take that bird's eye view because it gives them greater sense of what's going on, and we're teaching them to fish, right? Because I'm not always going to be there to say to them, you canceled on the professor 9 times. This is my daughter when she was littler, and she's standing on the mat just to demonstrate the idea. Back in the day, I used to just take craft paper and I would draw the mat and I would draw the shoes. So if you're one of those go to Michael's, go to the craft store kind of educators, you can totally do this. And you can have kids come and step on the mat and have thoughts and think about things. I know a lot of times educators are in a pickle where kids are quarreling at school and there's conflict between kids. And this is something you could do to help them think about each other's emotions. I think stories are sort of an undervalued way to teach social emotional skills. Literature is filled with information. And I find that people don't ask questions about how the character feels, or questions that really lead us to think about empathy, stepping into someone else's shoes, understanding social expectations and emotions. I think we do it with a certain special education population, and we use stories for those kids, but I think we could be doing this for all kids. And it's something you can do right now in COVID. So stories are not only great for their vocabulary and developing all those wonderful things, and I was an English major, I'm a huge reader, but also we can use them to bring social emotional thinking to daily life, right? And we can make it part of Zoom. We can make it part of small group lessons. I've had teachers make videos of reading stories and just pausing and asking the questions and then sending it out to people, because not every parent is at home. Not every parent has the ability to do this. Not every parent owns every book. So I'm just going to use one example, the Little Red Hen. I love the Little Red Hen. And the Little Red Hen is, a younger kid's story, but you can do this with all kinds of stories, right? And the Little Red Hen is one of my favorite people, because sometimes in life, I feel like I'm the Little Red Hen preparing everything and whatnot. So the idea of the Little Red Hen, right, if you remember it from childhood, is it's, about lessons in motivation and perspective and kindness and sharing, right? As a mom, by the way, rather than saying the reason I explode at you is that no one ever puts a dish in the dishwasher, you could read the Little Red Hen and be like, what does the hen feel like, right? But we have to consider the hen's feelings, right? And when I do this with kids, it's like, they're like, oh my God, the hen was mad because no one would help her. And I'm like, yes, that's why moms get mad. But we have all kinds of stories. I don't know if any of you have ever read an oldie, but I love this. My grandmother used to make me Frances Bread and Jam. And in it, Frances declares she will only eat bread and jam. And there's friends of hers in the story who have, she's sort of a little narcissistic. And so friends in the story are pointing out how lucky she is to have this wonderful lunch that her parents make. So there's a lot there, right? We can stop as we read the story and ask kids, what is this other kid saying to Frances? This other kid is basically saying, hey, you're not appreciating what you have, right? There's emotions from the Little Red Hen. She's showing her emotions. And so we can do this and help kids detect and step into the shoes of the character and really think about it. So we're drawing them a picture and we're making this come alive. And it can be anything. There's a million wonderful books out there that show how people feel, and we can use books to help build the social emotional muscle, because a lot of characters, kind of show different things, and we can elucidate those. I want to just touch briefly on something we can do that really, really helps kids. One of the things I've observed is that most kids who struggle socially are not great noticers. And maybe it's because of their anxiety, maybe it's because of their emotions, maybe they don't read social cues, but one of the things I developed early on was this concept of social spy. So what I do with kids is I teach them to be a social spy. And I do this with kids even on the spectrum, and we rehearse, and this is all laid out in I Will Know and Play With Me, and we rehearse to go and spy on people. And what I do is I give them a specific mission. So I teach them to watch without watching, right? So that they can be at the food court watching people, or be at their locker, or be in a cafeteria and listen. And I even am doing this in COVID because in these chat rooms and stuff that kids are using to learn virtually, there's chat and there's different things going on. And what they need to do is pause and notice. It's a great way to teach kids to look at what are the unspoken rules? What are kids looking at? What are kids talking about in school? You can also use it to ask kids, I want you to spy on everybody who has eye contact. I want you to spy on everybody who loses it and melts down. And it helps them compare their behavior to others. And also it reduces conflict. So rather than saying, you're obsessed with your phone, all you do is look at your phone, you don't bother with other people, ask them to spy on how people are with their cell phones and what does it look like, right? Because now instead of you telling them, they're observing it, which really, really makes it more powerful. So what I do is I have kids practice this spying. They can sometimes write things down in their phone or in a code in a planner if they need to remember stuff to report back. I have them do scavenger hunts. I have them watch different things like bugs and nature to become better observers. They can spy on facial expressions. We can make it fun and have toilet paper rolls become binoculars. I know toilet paper is a precious commodity, but we can do fun things to make this fun. But what needs to happen is that they need to become better noticers and better social observers, because again, we want to teach them to fish. I don't want to be there coaching them always. I want them to learn. And so this sort of dovetails into my monkey. So I have this monkey in my office. You can see him in the background. I stole him from my children, and actually my poodle has attacked him many times, and so he has no longer any ears, you will notice, and he's been sewn many times. So a lot of kids who struggle with how to connect to other people, how to make conversation, I notice that they don't kind of notice that people have signals and things that they demonstrate about what they're interested in, and these can be conversation starters. So as COVID has developed, I noticed that masks are a signifier, right? Masks sort of talk about our personality, who we are, and what we're doing. So I stole my son's masks and took pictures of them for you guys. And I have been putting them on the monkey. And sometimes when I work with kids virtually, even teenagers, and I do this lesson, I actually put them on the monkey, and even teenagers think it's funny, by the way. So the monkey is one of my props. So one of the things I do is to say, spy on people's interests, right? You're not sure how to make conversation with people. You're not sure how to start conversations. And I'll start asking them, what does a blank t-shirt tell us, right? So I'll put a blank t-shirt on the monkey, and a blank t-shirt tells us nothing, right? I don't really know. Maybe it says someone has simple tastes, but then I'll put a Spider-Man t-shirt on the monkey, and I'll say, a Spider-Man t-shirt tells us stuff, right? And it's a conversation starter, because does this person like Marvel or just Spider-Man, right? And so one of the things we can do is become observers of what people put out there, and we can use that to talk about things. And this might seem very simple to some people, but when kids aren't great social observers or they get stuck in their own anxiety, I find that they don't think of these things, right? So one of the things I've had them do is spy on everybody's interests, right? And come and report back. You really want to be friends with someone? Let's find out about them, right? Let's be curious and let's figure out stuff about them. You're not sure what to do. I mean, some of these poor kids are going to 6th grade, 9th grade, kindergarten. They've never known people before, and now they're half in school, half out of school. It's a really tough thing. So I'll teach them about spying on masks, spying on people's t-shirts, and they can use that to make conversation, even in a Zoom room, because it's something that gives you a little information. And even if the person says, oh, I don't even really like this t-shirt, my mom made me wear it, now you know something. What do you like? So one of the things I try to do is I try to help kids really make smart guesses and observe people and practice thinking about people's interests. So I wanted to do something fun at the very end of the presentation here, because the monkey is fun, let's face it. And for older kids, I do the same thing, right? You're in school, you're out of school, you're seeing people's t-shirts, you're seeing what people talk about. You know, you're anxious and you feel like you can't talk to anyone, then let's have you just sit in Spanish class and listen to what kids are talking about, and you can use that down the line. And then the book is available wherever books are sold. And I have a free video, and Scarlett, I'll put this in the chat. It's a free downloadable handout, sorry, not even a video, on how to teach social skills in daily life. And I'm happy to take questions. And Scarlett, not sure of maybe end the show, or should I stay here on this?
Carolyn, that was amazing. And I don't know if you were able to read the chat box, but he had everybody talking. Personally, I kept thinking, I always think when I hear about social emotional learning and different skills and tools, that big people need this too. So I just made a few comments like that. Because as you said earlier on, and I 100% agree, we have to continue to practice this. And life is this incredible thing that it gives us many opportunities to do this every day. So we continue to practice all these things, and we can practice them along with our kids, and we can make games out of it, which I love your ideas and what you put forth. I really appreciate that. My favorite book of all time, actually my mom and my favorite book of all time, is The Little Red Hen, by the way.
No kidding.
No, I mean it. I mean it. I love that book. If you all don't have it, you have to buy that book, because it is fantastic. And it's because we both feel like the Little Red Hen. But
that's right. I know my kids are always saying, it's because you think that you're like our servant. I'm like, I am.
Exactly. I really feel for the Little Red Hen. I can identify with her, definitely. This is amazing. Everybody loved your mat. Wondering if it's for sale.
It isn't for sale yet. I have been working on a store, and I will develop it to be for sale. I do have it downloadable, and I can definitely share that with people, and it is in the book. And like I say, you know, there's a lot of teachers out there who are great at crafts and stuff. I didn't originally have this exciting mat. A graphic designer made it for me. I originally used to take a big giant piece of craft paper and lay it on the floor and be like, let's do it. But my cousin who's a graphic designer was like, this is very sad. You need a real thing.
Well, we love it, and we're looking forward to the opportunity for when we can buy it. You've got some people saying that they love your book, and I know some people have put orders in while you've been talking. This was fantastic. This was so great. We did record it, and Carolyn and she's somebody that from the minute that I spoke with her, we just clicked. Like a kindred spirit. We think alike. And so we are going to do projects together. We have them in the works. So stay tuned because we are very excited for next year. And we're definitely going to be doing more webinars. We're going to see a lot more of Carolyn. Carolyn, thank you so much for all of this. This was amazing.
Oh, thank you. No, I'm so thrilled to find Scarlett and to be working with you. And, I know so many parents and educators are struggling right now. And believe me, I struggled to teach my son letters and word sounds last spring. So, this is my wheelhouse, but trust me, I understand that this is a struggle and it's not something everybody knows how to do. And so my goal in life is just to give people these tools in a really easy way that they can do in daily life, because I feel like, it's not something all of us were taught necessarily.
Exactly. I mean, I know I wasn't, and so had to learn as an adult, but I still struggle with some of these things. And I'm still practicing. I'm still perfecting. And I think that we all are. So this was amazing. We have let's see, one question here that now I'm not getting to. Do you ever talk about breath work in your book, Carolyn?
I don't. So I'm a huge fan of mindfulness and breath work and yoga and all these things. But what I felt was that there are some really fabulous people doing this better than I'm doing this, and also who are writing books about it and writing about it. So I do talk about like how to take, deep cleansing breaths, and I do have some calming techniques in the book, for sure. But what I tried to do was really think about what is not out there. And what do people need that they don't have? So for instance, there is no complete lesson track about reading the room. We talk about reading the room. We tell people to read the room, but there's no like, here's how you learn to read the room step by step. So I, being how I am, where I can never let anything go, I decided that I would develop that. And so in Why Will No One Play With Me is a complete chapter with lesson after lesson on how to teach someone to read the room. And they're very, a parent can take them and just read them right out of the book. But, I try to think of like, what do people not have? So that's sort of my reasoning with everything.
Yeah, well, it was amazing. Everyone loved it. We love you. Thank you so much for this incredible webinar. We really appreciate you. And everyone, I appreciate all of you. And check back for our next webinar. And Caroline and I are going to be coming out with some more stuff. So until then, thank you for choosing love.